I think it's becoming increasingly clear to the world that we can't operate with the United States empire. It's not something that can be reasoned with, and it's a dying empire, and that's why it's being so unreasonable. So it seems like the role of the great powers is try to manage this ailing mental patient from causing some type of global catastrophe. We are going into this multipolar world. I think it's clear that no matter what happens, the U.S. empire is over. We're watching its decline, and we don't know how it's going to play out. Let's just hope we don't have World War III and we don't have mass casualties across the world. But will we know that this multipolar world will be safer? How do we know that this is going to be a better world? Because I think a lot of people that are maybe in the West just have this idea, well, we have to maintain primacy because if not, then China's going to do all the things that we do, They're
Yeah.
going to start doing regime changes around the world.
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, China just doesn't have a history of doing that. And Iran doesn't either. Iran hasn't invaded any country. I hear different things, but like for at least 150 years. China hasn't launched a war since 1979. That was the attack on Vietnam. And so one of the major problems that China has is their troops don't have combat experience, unlike American troops. They just don't. But even to go into deep history, yeah, China expanded, but it was really very incremental. It was at its borders, in response to attacks. They never became the kind of expansionist power that certain Western countries have been. It's not to say that everything is wonderful about China and its relations with neighboring countries, but they just do not have a history of seeking anything like global hegemony. Now, it's always possible. You just never can say that. Well, sometime down in the future, China might become this. Of course, it could, but that's just not an argument, just sort of some sort of paranoid fantasies that just might come true. So therefore we have to do this. I think you just have to look at at the world that we live in. We don't have any control over what the world may, or we don't have much control or very little control over what the world might be in the future, the distant future, certainly. But we can make sane decisions in the present. And you just look at the actions of this U.S.-led global hegemony, and they have been consistently destructive. Not just destructive for the countries that have suffered the attacks, like Iran, or Iraq, or Syria, or you can Libya, one after another. These aren't just like just minor collateral damage, but in the case of places like Syria or Libya, or we're talking about just major human catastrophes, or Iraq. Let's not forget again, maybe 1 million people dead, millions and millions of refugees. These were horrors, and horrors that were perpetrated by these global hegemonists. And now there are wars in the world that are some terrible ones, for example, in Africa, that really don't fit into that paradigm. But these are the wars, that we ourselves are responsible for. And I don't see any argument for continuing this. It doesn't do us any good. I think in the end, you have to be a realist. Okay, a realist understands that there are always security concerns. There's always a risk of war. But a realist also looks at our current trajectory and understands that this maintenance of hegemony is in fact not possible. And in our own interests, we need to scale back. So again, these people who, insist that we must kind of maintain this control. First of all, you look at the results of their efforts, these are horrible catastrophes, and the blood is on their hands. We can't continue doing this just from a moral point of view. And, but then also they're fundamentally divorced from reality, because the reality is that the world is changing. That dominance that the U.S. that once had, especially in the wake of World War II, is fading, and it's fading ever more quickly. And you can accept it or you can't. If you accept it, you can retire from your position as global hegemon gracefully. It doesn't mean that the world that will ensue will not have, there will be no risk of war. There's always going to be. But at least in this matter where we have control, where we've done so much, committed so many wrongs already, we can make a wise decision and for our sake and for the world.
Do you think we will be able to make this wise decision and pull back and kind of enter the multipolar world as a major player and no longer have this expansionist, imperialist ideology, primacy?
Well, yeah, I have to say it's at least possible because it seems like these kind of arguments, the kind of arguments that we're making, and many other, let's say, geopolitical dissidents are making, are seeping in, even to, to the administration and to the mainstream. There's still, at the core, of course, things haven't changed. There's still even under Trump, in spite of like that speech that he gave at where was he? Was he in Qatar or was he in UAE? I can't remember. But,
Oh, right, I remember. Yeah.
yeah. But anyway, that speech he gave in the Persian at that Persian Gulf conference, about really the beginning of a multipolar world and the ending of regime change operations. Obviously, he didn't abide by that. He just not too much longer. Just a few weeks later, of course, he launched his attack and started talking about regime change again. But the fact that he gave that speech, the fact that Marco Rubio has talked about multipolar world, these concepts, this understanding is seeping in. It'll take a while, I think, for a real transformation to take shape. But I think the reality just cannot be denied for too long. And you're beginning to see it, like, at least it's at the margins, even within these establishments. I just, the big question is, I think inevitably they just have to accept it. You can't maintain this fiction of unrivaled supremacy for forever. Right now it's very hard to, and it's going to be increasingly difficult as the years pass. You can't maintain that fiction forever. The problem is, so eventually there's going to be acceptance of it. I don't think there's any question. It's just like, what are we going to do in the meantime? Are we going to continue to, are we going to lash out, or at some point are we going to begin to scale back, or we begin to, accept the reality? Will that happen gradually? That would be the best thing. Or are we going to, in fact, are we going to be so insistent, our leaders kind of, rather than accept that reality, they're going to take actions to maintain the fiction. Are they going to lash out in new ways? Are they going to try to demonstrate to themselves and to the world that, no, we are the hegemon? Are they going to launch new wars? Are they going to, attempt to, send troops directly into Ukraine or whatever, because they think that this is they see that, okay, the jig is up. If we let the Russians win, it's over. We're no longer the hegemon. Global hegemony is at stake. Are they going to actually act recklessly and send in troops? These are all possibilities. As the dying throes, you could say, of the empire could have some pretty, horrific consequences.
I think one of the big reasons to hope is that, yes, we are lashing out, but as we lash out, every time we lash out, we get a dose of reality that should hopefully be able to come to this conclusion that, hey, we are not the global hegemon anymore, that this goal of primacy is not working. Because we see it in so many instances. Trump talked big with the tariffs with China. What happened? We couldn't flex that economic weight. We tried the same thing with Russia, slap them with all these economic sanctions. Russia's economy is growing faster than anything in the G7. And then, same thing. He's like, okay, well, I'll end this war between Ukraine and Russia. Just got to knock some heads together and then it'll all be done. It didn't work. He can't dictate the terms here. It's not working. This is the same thing with the Iran. Oh, we could do a regime change. Whoops. That didn't work. This attack on Iran clearly did not go as planned for Israel and the West. It's like, okay, well, maybe there's some low-hanging fruit. We can take out the Houthis. Whoops, we can't take out the Houthis either. Yemen. So every single time that they try to lash out, it's like, oops, okay, this is a reality check for us. We do not have that control. And we've talked about it as well. Just, the moral power that's being lost, the military power that's being exposed to not be as great as it's cracked up to be. And then the economic power, you can see Trump is very scared. He's watching that as well. You had that tweet during the 12-day war, like, keep oil prices low. Don't let this panic, because he knows that the global economy could completely crash if Iran closes the Strait of Hormuz. Like, there's so many ways that the U.S. is so fragile. China could dump all of its U.S. treasuries, all of its U.S. debt, and just break the dollar. Everything is just, the United States is just holding on by a thread. And every time it tries to use its power, we can see that it is being hanging by a thread, and that it has to back down. It's had to back down in all of these. They want to threaten more sanctions on Russia. Russia's like, we don't care. We try to engage this trade war with China. Who got hurt? The United States. Okay, no more rare earth minerals for you, U.S. The U.S. military industrial complex, its armaments rely on these rare earth minerals. So it's just, maybe the more we do this, we're going to continue to lash out. We got to keep on saying we're number one. We are the dominant power on this planet. But when we try to do that, it just shows that we're not, and it becomes clear to the rest of the world, and eventually the United States, and hopefully maybe we can be humble and say, well, we're still pretty good, but you guys are pretty good too. We're all powerful. And you can almost see Trump doing that. That's the way he almost acts. Like, he goes from like saying, oh, we're going to kill the Ayatollah, to regime change, to, oh, what a hit, we had such a sneak attack, to, oh, Brown, they're pretty good, maybe we could do trade with them, maybe we could do oil, like, oh, they're pretty tough guys, like that's almost like his attitude, so maybe the one thing you can say about Trump is he just changes his mind constantly, so who knows.
Right. Yeah, in a way you could say that he kind of reflects in a very chaotic way the kind of the complete competing
narratives, right?
Right. Within, they all come out with him in a chaotic fashion. He doesn't have his one line, but he just one day he represents one narrative, the other day, or 2 hours later it's the next. I think that's what we can hope for, is that this global hegemonic order will continue to lash out. But, hopefully, or as everybody will have its dying throes, but each time there is some sort of attack, or, a new, a new attempt to enforce its will, its weakness will be exposed, but without, and will still fall short of the catastrophic scenarios that sometimes we talk about. That's the best that we can hope for. I think actually, I think there's reason to be hopeful for that. Let's say, like in the case of Europe, and I think that's what we're going to see. That's my prediction. It's something along the lines of what that's what we're seeing already. We'll see a continuation of that. I think my greatest fear is for the Middle East, because we do just have some, we have a country that just seems to be firmly committed to this expansionist course, and is nuclear armed, and I don't think would hesitate to use those nuclear arms if at some point it finds itself in serious trouble, to the point where there's fears for its continued existence. Again, I think if we want to point to one place in the world where we could see a true catastrophe, a nuclear catastrophe, it's still the Middle East.
So crazy. It's like we're all playing this game of humanity on this planet, and we just have one rogue player that's just going to threaten to throw the whole table over, throw the board over. What's going on?
Don't forget that. I mean, the U.S. and the West are very, very complicit. I mean, actively complicit.
I know.
Right.
But it seems like a lot of it is because of our, the Zionist control of our government and dictating the foreign policy in the Middle East. It's just this. Everybody's arguing, like, is it really Israel that's in control, or the United States is in control? I don't even know if that's the way to look at it. For me, it's almost like it's just kind of one entity. This is part of just U.S. Yeah. Unfortunately, this is what U.S. empire looks like. Is that Israel is a big part of that. That's what it is.
Yeah.
And and it's a feedback loop between the two. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think that's basically true.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've said enough today.
Okay. All right. We'll end it there. I was going to ask you a bit about the New York mayor because everyone's going crazy about it. I don't know if you want to say one thing or we say that for later.
Well, I'll just say something which is, it probably is maybe irrelevant, but yeah, I looked up, I wanted to know more about him, and I found out that he was actually born in the city that I was born in. He was born in Kampala, Uganda. So anyway, that's a connection I have with him. We'll just leave it at that. We can talk about him more later.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Okay, Dad. Have a good rest of your day and a great weekend.
Okay. You too.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.